So you just got an A7S III because you want some of that sweet, low-light, 10-bit 4K video, but now you're not sure which memory card you need to record at those high bit rates? Well, let's look at which memory card is the best for your A7S III. Hey everyone, Camber here, showing you how to use your camera to make good videos. So if you're new, consider subscribing. And first off, I do not have an A7S III, nor have I ever used one yet, but everything I'm telling you is coming from multiple reliable resources explaining the A7S III video bit rates, such as B&H Photo, as well as A7S III reviews from Philip Bloom and Gerald Undone that are linked below. And all the cards I'm talking about today will be listed in the description, and I'll also put updated info in the description once the camera manual and any new compatibility news is released, so be sure to check that out. But starting off, you're probably pretty excited when Sony announced that this camera has dual memory card slots that can take either SD or the new CFexpress Type A cards, because every filmmaker wants to have a backup of their footage. So keep in mind that you'll need to have two of the cards that are recommended if you want to be able to have backup recordings of your footage. Looking at the video bit rates for the A7S III listed on B&H, we can see that the highest listed recording rate is 600 megabits for the 10-bit 422 60 frames per second at 4K using A7S III. When it comes to choosing a fast enough memory card for your camera, it's really important that you understand that there is a difference between megabits and megabytes. Let old me explain it. So 8 bits equals 1 byte, and therefore 8 megabits equals 1 megabyte. Megabits, little b, megabytes, big B. It's important to know the difference when we get into understanding read and write speeds, because people often see that their camera records at 100 megabits per second, little b, and think, oh, I need a card that records at 100 megabytes per second, big B, when actually 100 megabits per second equates to 12.5 megabytes per second. So looking back at those video bit rates, we can see that the highest bit rate is 600 megabits per second. When you divide by 8, that translates to 75 megabytes per second. And you need a minimum sustained write speed that is higher than your camera's highest recording bit rate so that you won't have any drop frames or recording errors in your videos. The V90 on this UHS-II card means that the minimum sustained write speed is 90 megabytes per second, which is higher than the A7S III's max recording rate of 75 megabytes per second. So you know that you're good to go with this card. So with the highest recording rate listed at 600 megabits per second, a V90 card should theoretically have you covered in every recording mode on this camera. However, when you combine the S&Q mode with the A7S III 4K mode at 100 or 120 frames per second, or HD at 200 or 240 frames per second, the camera will inform you that you need the new CFexpress Type A card. And I'm assuming the camera's recording at a higher bit rate than 90 megabytes per second and then outputting the slowed down conversion at 600 megabits per second or less to save some space. But regardless of how the camera's doing it, you can't record these modes on an SD card, and you also won't get any sound when recording in these modes because the camera's doing the slowed down conversion for you. But you can still get 4K up to 120 frames per second and HD up to 240 frames per second in the IPB mode if you switch to regular A7S, and you'll still have sound. And you may be wondering, what's the difference between ALL-I and IPB files? Well, IPB is recorded differently and is a lot more compressed than ALL-I, giving you smaller file sizes but also lower image quality. But this combination of CFexpress Type A and UHS-II SD cards will have you covered as far as speed goes, with the CFexpress card being able to record any mode in the camera and the UHS-II V90 card being able to record in any mode except for that ALL-I 120 frames per second, 4K, and also Full HD 240 frames per second in that S&Q mode. So now let's look at what size memory cards you'll need. So based on the bit rates listed on B&H, a 256 gigabyte V90 SD card will get you 57 minutes of 4K at 60 frames per second in ALL-I and 2 hours and 22 minutes of 4K at 24 frames per second. And you'll get half those times if you go with the 128 gigabyte V90 card. However, if you want to be able to shoot that ALL-I 4K at 120 frames per second or Full HD up to 240 frames per second in the S&Q mode, then you'll have to go with the new CFexpress Type A card. And right now, Sony is the only maker of this card with an 80 gigabyte and 160 gigabyte options. They're much more expensive than SD cards, but they also give you up to 400 megabytes per second sustained write speeds. So this 160 gigabyte CFexpress card will give you 35 minutes of 4K at 60 frames per second in ALL-I and an hour and 28 minutes of 4K at 24 frames per second. Now, these UHS-II cards, and especially the CFexpress Type A cards, can be a bit pricey, so I just want to throw a disclaimer out there again that I have not used the A7S III yet, and I don't know of any compatibility issues with any particular brands. I've used Lexar cards and my Sony cameras with no issues before, and Philip Bloom said that he used pro grades with the A7S III without any issues, and Gerald Undone said that he had some Sony Tough cards that he used with it, and some worked and some didn't. So to sum it up with all that in mind, I would suggest this 256GB UHS-II V90 card in order to be able to shoot in any normal video mode, or this 160GB CFexpress Type A card to be able to shoot in any possible mode the camera offers. And again, be sure to get a second card if you want to have backup recordings of your footage. And there's also a CFexpress card reader in the description. And again, it doesn't have to be these brands. I'm just trying to find you the best deal. And I have links for all the cards in the description, and I'd be surprised if you didn't have any questions after that, so leave any of those in the comments and I'll try to clarify anything I can. And also feel free to join my private Facebook group linked in the description where I can better answer your filmmaking questions. But if this video is helpful, then please help me out, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you soon.